Kimberly Fletcher with Moms for America. Really excited to have all of you with us today because we have a very special guest to talk about some of the things that are going on in our country today. And while we're all thinking about whether or not our kids are going back to school or whether or not we should wear a mask, there's another thing that's going on. The story of COVID that no one else is telling. And that is the story of the people who are sick, suffering, and maybe even dying because they do not have COVID. Yes, I'm serious. There's a lot of things going on out there that I didn't really know until I experienced it myself. The first person I thought that we just had to have come on to talk about this conversation is someone who really knows because she's in the industry, and that is a pediatrician and someone who is on our advisory board, and we greatly appreciate Dr. Rosemary Stein. So as we bring her on, I just want to give her an opportunity to talk a little bit about who she is, what her family does, so that you know that she really does know her stuff and what she's talking about as we have this conversation. Dr. Rose, tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice.
Well, thank you so much, Kimberly. Thanks for counting on me and giving me the opportunity to share our story. So my husband and I are doctors, and we own our own practice, which is an unusual thing these days because most practices and doctors are now working for medical organizations and hospital groups. But my husband and I own a practice in Dead Center, North Carolina, and we've owned this practice for the last 20 years. We have about 5,000 patients, about 2,500 families that we take care of. So that when we share the stories of what we've seen over the last 4.5 months since the COVID pandemic started, we're giving it to you firsthand. And the reason that we started our practice 20 years ago is because we wanted to practice medicine in a more holistic, in a more compassionate way. And the thing that I do want to talk the most about is the management of coronavirus versus the actual disease, and how it is the management that is mostly affecting our lives versus the disease itself.
There are a lot of people who are talking about that. There's a woman named Dr. Kelly Victory who said that very thing. And she said, COVID is real, the stats are not. And we're basing all of our management care on false information, and people aren't getting the care that they need. So what I experienced is a couple weeks ago, I had a serious ATV accident. And I had to be rushed to the emergency room. And the moment that I got into the emergency room, you pass that door and your family's left outside. I was not in a position to make good medical decisions for myself. I was not really necessarily coherent. I had a broken collarbone, still recovering from that, a fractured rib. I had a hematoma that was very dangerous. And I could not really competently speak on my own behalf for my medical care. But I could not have anyone there in with me. I didn't have the support that I needed. I didn't have the help with my husband's input. And I kept saying, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And they were going to let me go home. And the only reason why I got admitted instead of them saying, fine, go home, is because I passed out every time they tried to send me home. So they admitted me. My husband immediately would have said, no, she needs admitted. This is not good. So they admitted me, and then they planned to have the surgery. Before I had surgery, they COVID tested me. And they told me that if I tested positive, they would not do the surgery. Are you kidding me? Well, I know I have a hematoma. I've got a broken collarbone. I mean, I'm a mess. So I tested negative. So they did the surgery, but my husband was not allowed to see me before or after. When I went into the room on the floor after the surgery, he was not allowed to come into my hospital room. Anytime any medical staff came in to talk to me about my care, I would call him on the phone and put him on speakerphone so he could hear what they were saying, so he knew how to take care of me. This is the story that no one's talking about. I needed his support. I needed my family there, and I was denied at the time when I needed it most, that care. That's the kind of thing that unless you experience it yourself, you don't know what's happening or that it's going on. But families and individuals all across the country are dealing with this.
One of the healing factors of anyone who's going through something that's traumatic or a severe medical condition is that your body will secrete endorphins. And those endorphins are released because of human touch, and because your family is there with you and they give you those kinds of feelings of, yes, I can get through this. And there is no production of it in that kind of situation. Your body doesn't heal naturally without your family being with you. And doctors know this, and well, perhaps the medical system does not, but we know this as doctors, that part of, and we've done it for years and years and years, where it was important to bring a dog in, or a baby in to help somebody with cancer to heal. And you're not being allowed that very important factor of human healing, of heart healing. There's the human connection is lacking in that situation, so the body system will not heal. And so we need, as physicians, and hopefully to bring in the hospital administrators and say, this is bad medicine. We must stop this. We have to tend to the patient that is before us, and not to a medical situation that is lurking out there.
Now, when I was in the hospital, I did not hide my disdain for the whole entire COVID rule thing, and why my husband wasn't allowed to be with me. And every single medical personnel that came into my room, I let them know how I felt about it. And every single one of them agreed with me. And they said that they were not happy with this, and they kept talking about the rule makers, and they felt like they were completely distanced from the patient. And the patient, I mean, I as a patient, they were really nice, don't get me wrong, and they were trying to make the best of it. I felt so vulnerable and so just, I mean, I was scared on a lot of occasions, and that comfort that I would get from my husband saying it's all going to be okay, it's like that wasn't there. But they kept talking about the rule makers that were dictating, and they felt like they had no control. And if they did any pushback, then they would get sanctioned or fired even for saying something. So these heroes that, like 2 months ago, were going out on the balconies and applauding the heroes in healthcare, who were taking care of these patients, now have been bullied into submission by administrators who aren't even doctors who practice medicine, telling them how they're going to treat their patients, what patients they're going to treat, and when they're allowed to treat them.
It really reiterates that the reason that we started our medical practice was to be able to make our own decisions. And look at it 20 years later, how much medicine has changed. We would have been able to make much of our own decisions. And right now, the medical practices, not even just the hospitals, but medical practices are involved in the same sort of situation. Everybody has to be masked up. Everybody has to be gloved up. It takes the humanity out of medicine. You can't even listen to what your doctor is saying half the time. You can't listen to what the patient is saying half the time. You're so busy gowning up that you forget that there's a person behind that gown. It's really a chaotic place for medicine to be in right now. All is not bad. All is not lost. But we have to realize that we're not in a good place right now. And this needs to change, and we need to be part of the instrument that changes all of this together as moms and dads.
This past Sunday, the awesome mom who manages our email, she had her baby, and she was sharing her experience and what she went through. And she said when she got to the hospital, they immediately put a mask on her. She's in labor. And then they took the mask off to do a COVID test, put the mask back on. She was allowed to have her husband with her, but a lot of hospitals don't allow even that. And so she goes into labor. Through the entire labor and delivery, she has this mask on. Now, I've given birth 7 times, and I'm like, don't you put anything on me, okay? I mean, that's a very, very challenging time when you're giving birth and you're in labor. The last thing you want is to be inhibited in any way. You're supposed to be making it comfortable. So she had to have that mask on the whole entire time. Her husband was COVID tested. He had to have a mask on. And then after the baby was born, they tested the baby. And I was like, wow. And so I called around the country to several different maternity wards to ask what their policies were. And they're all pretty much the same. They're a little bit different based on where you are, but the basic standards are, if you have a planned procedure of like an induction or a C-section, then you have to have a COVID test 48 hours before, and when you show up, you have to be negative. So I'm like, so if you're not negative, you don't have the procedure? What does that mean? When you show up in labor, then they immediately do a rapid COVID test. And then depending on the hospital, most hospitals will, if you test negative, some will allow you to not wear a mask in labor and delivery. Others, they don't care. If you are negative or positive, you're still going to just wear the mask. In some hospitals, you are allowed to have someone with you, and others, they just don't allow it. So you're doing this all on your own, no support in labor and delivery. Oh my, are you kidding me? And then when the baby's born, most hospitals will have a standard 24-hour test. If the mother tests positive, they will every time do a 24 and a 48-hour test. If the mother tests positive and the baby negative, or vice versa, then they separate the mother and the baby. In some hospitals, the mother will have a choice as to whether or not she does that, but they really stress the importance of being separate. In other hospitals, you don't have the choice, they just separate you. This is the worst scenario that I could possibly think of for having a baby. And I am feeling for every one of those pregnant mamas out there who are going to deliver during this ridiculous time of treating healthy people like they're sick.
It's one of the moments where a woman is the most vulnerable. And your husband might not be there. Somebody to hold your hand that you know. The compassion is stripped. And here you are delivering a baby, perhaps on your own. You're being tested for a disease that you feel inside, I don't have. I've been protecting myself and my baby for the last, I don't know how many weeks. Why do I need? And then you have the fear of, what if I am positive, until you get that test back. And then if you are positive, all the implications that come from being an asymptomatic person that is about to deliver a baby, and is that going to affect the baby? It's, once again, it's the stripping of humanity from medicine. We're treating statistics and not our patients. I have had those situations where I've had a mom that was positive with a baby that was negative, and then they separated them out, and then they asked me, well, will you be able to see this patient? And I said, but the mom, what are you going to do with the mom? You leaving her in the hospital? All right, who's going to bring me the child? And then we had a mom who was negative, and then the baby was tested. That makes no sense. Where do you think that the baby would have been exposed to COVID? It's in uterus. And the baby was positive. And so then they separated the two out. The baby stayed in the hospital. The mom was not allowed to stay in the hospital. She was told, mom had a fit, and she says, there's no way that I'm going home without my baby. So because she made such a huge fit, she was allowed to stay in the hospital. Instead of staying in the hospital, I think they told her that the baby needed to stay in the hospital 5 days. So then they granted her the possibility of going home at the 4th day with her baby. I mean, we're managing a possible medical condition and not taking care of the patient. And that's a poverty in medicine.
There are a couple of things that I've seen. So I guess it was early April, I had a urinary tract infection. And so just, a normal thing that you go and usually get care for. I just went to the urgent care, no problem. Well, I had to call ahead. There's a big sign outside that says, call us, don't come in. You have to go to the back door. They come out the back door in a complete hazmat suit. And then they walk you in through the clinic and put you in a room. They give you a mask before you go in, and it's like they're treating everybody as if you have COVID, whether you have COVID or not. And then Debbie, who's on our board, so she goes to take her son just a couple days ago. He's 16. Takes him to the doctor, and when she goes back into the room with the doctor, he looks at her and says, how'd you get in here? And she's like, I walked in, don't mess with me. I'm the mama. And so there are practices where you can't even accompany your own child in to see the doctor. I mean, there's some serious stuff going on here that needs to be addressed.
Try getting a medical history out of a 5-year-old or even a 12-year-old and see how far you're going to get with that. You may come out with a completely different set of diagnosis than what you actually took your child in for. So that's just silly medicine. And I don't think that we understand that this is a dangerous track that we're on, because when we're doing this, we're stripping humanity from people and from the practice of medicine. We're not really trying to heal people from COVID. We're trying to manage a COVID situation. We go through like 7 different questions that we're asking the patient so that I safeguard the other 99% from possibly being in contact with somebody who has the virus, so that their lives are not disrupted. It's a disruption. That's the word about it. So 99% of my patients' lives have been disrupted. If you become COVID positive right now, your family is quarantined for 2 weeks, your whole family, including whoever the breadwinner is in the family. And I, as a doctor, what I'm thinking is, I can't allow that. I can't allow this whole family to go without an income for 2 weeks, because there's this condition that really is not as serious as we think it is, especially among children.
Tell us the difference between the Platonic medicine and what was the other one, the Hippocratic?
Hippocratic medicine. And so as older doctors like myself know, when we graduated from medical school, we put our right hand up, we put the other hand on the Bible, and we said the Hippocratic Oath from start to finish. And the first is, first of all, I promise to do no harm. Imagine if we just said that, I promise to do no harm. And I will treat my patient as an individual at all times. I will uphold life in its most sanctified degree. This is what we used to say, and that meant that we had a relationship and an obligation to that patient that is in front of us. That's Hippocratic medicine. That puts you, your patient, and the maker of your patient and yourself in this sacred relationship. And so the other kind of medicine is Platonic medicine. It's the medicine that is practiced for the good of the people, of the community, of the state. And so Plato believed that the state was the holder of the good, and therefore that you could do something if somebody was not important enough or not deemed capable enough of needing what the state could offer, then you had to make a decision that maybe that life was not valuable enough to continue to treat that patient. Now, he wasn't trying to be evil. He was thinking in his own way for the greater good. But we've sort of divided ourselves from this Hippocratic medicine that we were just practicing maybe 50 years ago to totally moving the needle over to Platonic or Plato medicine today. And so what you were describing in the hospital for yourself and for the lovely mom who just delivered her baby is a complete immersion into Platonic medicine versus Hippocratic medicine, where we're practicing medicine for the good of the people and not for the individual that is in front of us.
You know, this is exactly what I'm seeing from all the stories we're hearing from moms across the country, from the way that they're treating people in the nursing homes, people who are healthy, where there are people who have long-term illnesses like diabetes, even cancer treatments, or even simple things like orthodontist. I mean, my son couldn't see an orthodontist for 2 months. Just simple things like that, where people are not getting the care that they need or afraid to get the care that they need. One of my friends, her dad had a heart attack and he refused to go to the emergency room because he was terrified he was going to get COVID. And we've scared people to death. And then there are the people who do have the diabetes or the long-term ailments who have not been able to see their doctors or medical staff because of COVID. And so instead of them coming in and getting their, regular checks to make sure their medicine's okay, their numbers are okay, doctors are just calling in the prescriptions that they need and they're not seeing them. So what I'm seeing is I'm really feeling like we've come to a point where we have complete socialized medicine, where administrators who have absolutely nothing to do with actual medical care are making the decisions as to who's going to get care, what kind of care they're going to get, and when they're going to get it. That's socialized medicine. And saying the Platonic or the Hippocratic, I can see the difference between what American medicine was and what made us so unique and where it is we're going, and I don't like it.
Well, people would come from all over the world to get medical treatment here because they knew that they didn't understand that they were getting Hippocratic medicine, where the individual was more important than the overall good. But that's exactly what was happening. But think about this. When COVID first came out, our Department of Social Services, or Medicaid, had a meeting of all the doctors that accepted Medicaid, and Dave and I are included in that. And so we had a virtual meeting sort of like this. And I thought that we were going to talk about COVID care, medications, treatment plan, how to identify the families that had COVID. The whole time was, well, 5 minutes was dedicated to, if you think a patient has COVID, he has COVID, so lock him inside the house and tell him that he can't leave for the next 14 days. I am not exaggerating. So 5 minutes was dedicated to that. The other 55 minutes was dedicated to making your practice survive based on virtual medicine. I mean, that was clearly not acceptable. Virtual medicine? How do you treat a patient virtually when they have a cardiac problem, when they have a pulmonary problem? How about cancer? The whole thing was how to make your practice survive through this. Well, that wasn't my concern at the moment. It was, how do I make sure that my patients do okay? I have 5,000 patients that I have an obligation to. They're my patients, they're my extended family. How do I make sure they do well through this pandemic? If we have indeed a pandemic, let's treat it as such and figure out how to give the doctors the information that they need so that their patients do well. It had nothing to do with this. I was appalled. We've stripped medicine of its heart, of its humanity, by doing it this way. I think that we can get medicine back to having a heart and being Hippocratic again, but it's going to take you and me and moms and probably the president involved in this for him to understand that we cannot leave medicine in such an inhumane spot anymore.
Well, I think when you have taken the humanity out of medicine, you open the door for a lot of really scary things that we don't ever want to see repeated in any country in the world.
That is very true. That is very true. It does have its similarities to that kind of medicine where it's for the good of the people. We experiment, we do certain things because it's for the good of the people. No, medicine was invented by the great physician as an individualized system for the person to heal. We're not doing that anymore, and we need to get back to the great physician or Luke kind of medicine.
One of the guys on our team, his mother is in a nursing home. And in early April, late March, early April, when we realized that the elderly were the ones who were most susceptible and that nursing homes were a hotbed for COVID, he immediately went to take his mom out and bring her home for home care, and they refused to release her. Now, I cannot imagine what he must have been thinking. What form did he fill out when he put his mother in an assisted living center that said, you now have complete control over the life of my mother? Nobody signs that away, but they have taken that role and are now dictating how you can see your family members, when you can see if you can see your family members, and whether or not you can even release them into the public. You dealt with this yourself.
Yes, I did. My mom is 81 years old, and she is such a strong woman. We had to put her in an assisted living home several years ago for safety issues. On her 81st birthday was the last time that I was able to see her personally until a couple of weeks ago. In the middle of all of that, probably because she wasn't eating, she was getting depressed. She was not, her will to live had been completely diminished. Well, she got very ill with pneumonia. She was admitted for 4 days. We weren't able to see her at that time. I asked numerous times to be able to see her. The process to be
You're a doctor. You're a doctor, and you couldn't even go in and see her mom.
That's right. And the doctors are being quite kind. They said, oh, that's going to be, I don't even remember how they described it, but they said, it's going to be difficult for you to get here than to go and visit the Queen of England herself. And I said, they said, and by the time that you're vetted, or whatever word that they use, for me to be able to pass all the tests, your mom's probably going to be out of here anyway. But it was quite a process. I guess it would have been easier just to go and talk to the president than it would have been to see my mom at that time. And so that once again, it showed me, even though I'm a pediatrician, how detrimental this COVID management has been. It's across the whole spectrum of ages that COVID management has affected American life. And really what it gets down to is that the management, this deleterious management, has got to stop. It's very important for parents to know what the numbers are among children and among child transmission.
So what are the numbers among child transmission?
Oh, I have such good news. 0. In my practice, among our 5,000 patients, we have not seen one child-to-child or one daycare transmitted case of coronavirus. This is really, really positive news, and you're going to hear it. I've heard a lot of doctors talk about it, but not enough. It really doesn't seem to be permeating that coronavirus does not affect children almost at all. Children seem to be immune to COVID. And this is wonderful news, because really in the heart of us, what it means, if a child doesn't transmit it to a child, if a child has very little likelihood of transmitting it to an adult, what it means is that we can feel comfortable opening our schools back up without masks and without fear, because children need to have their lives back in the middle of all of this.
I 100% agree with you that our children need to have their lives back. I had to explain to my 2-year-old granddaughter why she could not go to the park across her street through tear-filled eyes. Why? And I'm like, well, I'd love to explain. I don't know. So they have them all blocked off with all these, yellow tape and cones everywhere, not open, and it's like, the child is sitting there crying, going, I don't understand. Why is it not open? It's right there. It's like, are you kidding me?
Oh my
So
goodness.
there are a lot of things I think that we have learned from this. And this is a discussion that is not being had and needs to. This is the story of COVID that is not being told. The story of the people, the children, the families, the individuals who are being hurt, who are being harmed, who are even, sick and not being treated, and some even dying because they don't have COVID. The management of this is so non-productive, and those who have had consistent health care or surgeries that needed, whether they're elective surgeries or even the elective surgeries that were needed, they're not happening. Basic care is not being given, and that Hippocratic care, that holistic approach that was always there, it's not. So the big question is, how do we get it back? And one of the things, I think, one of the really big things that we can do on an ongoing basis is understand the difference between healthcare and medical care. Because you hear this so much, healthcare industry, healthcare industry, healthcare industry. And so it's kind of been beat into our heads where we believe that if you need anything that has any relation to your health, you need an expert to go to talk about it. We have a medical industry, not a healthcare industry. Our healthcare is our own responsibility. Our nutrition, our exercise regime, how much time we're sleeping, how we're nurturing our children, that's all on us.
We have learned how to manage things that we perhaps would not have managed ourselves. And we've probably learned how to do this in a much more holistic, natural way. And we're taking better care of our families. And I think that is the little bright spot in all of this, is that hopefully a lot of families have taken more personal responsibility in their health, and that is healthcare. The healthcare is you individually taking care of your family.
I think it's really a great wake-up call on the personal responsibility side. So there's a couple other things that I've realized that we can do. And a big one is, if you are in the situation where you do need medical care and they are denying you that assistant person, there is something that you can do. The rule makers are the ones that are dictating to the medical personnel what they're going to do. The medical personnel are just trying to obey the rule makers so they don't get sanctioned or lose their jobs. But they would love to give you every opportunity to give you what you want if they can keep from being fired. So here's the solution to all. When I was in the hospital, a chaplain came in to see me, and I again expressed my disdain for the situation. And he said, well, let me give you some hope, okay? And a tool. And you didn't hear this from me. And I said, okay. And he said, all you have to do is say, I am not competent to make medical decisions on my behalf. I need to have whoever the person is with you, whether it's your husband, your mother, whoever it is. You have to have that person in with you. They have to allow you to have that person. So it protects the medical staff and appeases the administrators and gives you the care that you need. I had to go into the emergency room twice after my surgery. So I went into the emergency room and I said it. I am not competent to make medical decisions on my behalf. And so the nurse wheels me back, and her supervisor gives her that look, and she goes, I asked, she's not competent. And she's like, oh, okay.
I used to tell the parents a very similar word. Sometimes a person will make a decision for you, whether it's a doctor or a nurse or an administrator, that you do not feel comfortable with. And so that was a word that I gave parents a lot. I said, if they send you home with this and you don't feel comfortable, you have got to express that. And it is very hard for a doctor or a person who is making a decision for you to get around that word. I don't feel comfortable going home. I don't feel comfortable in this situation without my husband. So competent and comfortable sort of add on to each other. There is an intuition, especially moms. Dads have it too, but there's nothing like the intuition of a mom. And I said, moms, when you go into the hospital, you have to go with your maternal intuition armed up. You have to feel very sure of yourself, even though they're the doctors. Nobody knows your child like you do. Your maternal intuition can beat our medical books many, many times. So don't think that you're helpless or hopeless, moms. You're not. That child has been given to you by God, and nobody else can do the job that you would do or make the decisions that you would make.
I love that. And that brings me to the third point, and that is we've got to be assertive. We can't be cowed by the current situation or the people who are pushing us and telling us you can't do this. The more that we speak, the more we will be heard. So on the assertive side, I want to say that there are people all over the country who are having these stories. This is the story that's not being told. This is the story we need to start hearing. Go on Facebook, record your story, tell people what's going on, post on Facebook, post on your social media, send it out in email. We need to be heard. We need to take the time to share the story that's not being shared and be assertive when we are in situations where we feel like we are not comfortable and we are not being given the care that we need. Which brings me to the fourth point. The rule makers. The rule makers are not hearing from us. Do you know who's hearing from us? The medical staff, and we're blaming on them, and it's not them. It is not the medical staff. They are just doing what they're told because they have warlords, rule maker warlords rolling over them and threatening them and bullying them into submission. We need to go to the administrators. And I've started doing that. I called the hospital where I was at, and I told the administrators what I felt. I'm in the process of writing a letter to send to those administrators and saying this is unacceptable. And we need to be doing that. Go directly to the administrators. Have them hear how we feel. And then the last point is the medical industry is a monetary industry. They are in the business of making money. Mm-hmm. They have to put food on their tables. They have to feed their kids. It is a money-making business. If you do not like the care that you're getting, you let them know you're going to take it somewhere else. If you're pregnant and you're going to have a baby, you call that medical ward and you ask them what their standards, their current policies are, and you tell them, oh, I don't like that, so I'm going to go to another hospital. If more and more of us do that, the more of us who do that, the more we are going to change this back to the Hippocratic medicine, the Luke medicine, that made America the greatest medical system in the world. And if we don't do that, so let me go over those 5 things again. First, take personal responsibility for the management of our own health care, because it is not the medical industry's job to provide for our health. It is ours. Second, if you find yourself in a situation where you're in an emergency room, an emergency situation, then you let them know, I am not competent or comfortable with making decisions on behalf of my own medical care. They have to let someone come with you. Assert yourself. Assert yourself through your social media platforms, through the networks that you have. When you're at the doctor, you assert yourself and you say, no, this is not okay. You constantly say, this is not okay. You do not need to be cowed. Have the courage to stand up for yourself and your rights, because that is your right. Fourth, contact the administrators. Give them heck. And finally,
and to that point, let me say something about that. That every single letter that is written to a hospital administrator has to be answered directly. So when it's very powerful, when you actually write that letter and you put it in writing, they have to write back. They have to call you or write back. There's no way around it. It's part of the JACO rules that has to be addressed. So that's very important for put it in writing. Don't just make a phone call. Make sure that you put pen to paper and send the letter in, because they have to respond.
That's a power, you guys. That is empowering. We're giving you empowerment today. So write the administrators. Even if you haven't specifically been in that situation, write the administration, tell them that you do not like the policies that they're putting forth. Same thing with the nursing homes. Write those administrators in those nursing homes. Please take the time to sit down. It doesn't have to be long, just short. I do not accept these policies. I would not come to your hospital if you're going to endorse these policies, if you're going to promote or require these policies. And then shop for freedom. Shop for the care that you're going to get. And if you live in Burlington, North Carolina, call Dr. Rose, because you'll get it there.
The reason I wanted to share a lot of this with you and with your audience is because the truth shall indeed set us free. When you know the truth and you know what's actually going on and what the numbers really are, then you're able to do a lot with that. And your audience will be able to be empowered and to be able to do much more with this information as a group of people than if they were just at home in fear.
Right. So moms, what we're going to do is I'm going to put these 5 things down on the list. We'll post them below on just below the video. Please share this. Share this with every mama you know, everybody in your network. Everyone needs to know this. Just like Dr. Rose said, the truth will set us free. If we know what's going on, if we know the truth of what's going on, and we know what to do about it, then we won't fear anymore. And fear is the enemy of freedom, so it's time to get back to freedom. Well, Dr. Rose, thank you so much for being with us today. I cannot thank you enough for your time and actually, I'm empowered. So with everything that's going on, having you come on has given me some positive outlook on where we can go from here. And like you said, if we're going to change it, it's going to be moms and dads and people like you uniting together, great doctors, to stand up for what's right and what's true, and make a difference to bring us back to where medicine should be in America. Thank you, Dr. Rose.
Very nice. You have a nice day.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
you too. Bye-bye.